The classroom buzzed with the low murmur of students chatting before the lesson began. The afternoon sun filtered through the blinds, casting long lines of gold across the desks. At the front of the room stood Mr. Han, the new health education teacher. His face was calm but stiff, his fingers nervously fidgeting with the chalk. He had prepared for weeks, yet, even now, the title of today's lesson made his palms sweat. He turned toward the whiteboard, writing carefully in large letters. Sex education, understanding consent and responsibility. The room instantly erupted in whispers and snickers. Did he just say sex education? One boy whispered. Oh my God, seriously, a girl muttered, trying not to laugh. Mr. Han cleared his throat, trying to maintain control of the class. All right, everyone. Please settle down. This is an important topic. And I expect you to treat it with maturity. A voice from the back shouted, Sir, are you even experienced enough to teach this? The class burst into laughter. Mr. Han froze. His face turned red as he forced an awkward smile. I have gone through proper teacher training, and this is part of the curriculum, he replied, trying to keep his composure. The same student leaned forward with a grin. Come on, sir. You look like the type who's never even dated. That earned another round of laughter. Mr. Han's jaw tightened. He turned toward the board again, pretending to write, just to avoid eye contact. Inside, his mind was spinning. Why do they always make it sound like being a virgin is a crime? He had devoted his life to becoming a teacher, to helping others. But moments like this made him feel like he didn't belong here. He took a deep breath and faced them again. Whether someone has experience or not doesn't matter, he said firmly. What matters is that you all understand how to be responsible with your own choices. The laughter slowly died down. A few students looked away, embarrassed. Still, one of them couldn't resist whispering. So he really is a virgin, huh? Mr. Han's grip on the marker tightened. His lips trembled, but he kept a polite smile. Just then, the door slid open. The students straightened instantly as Vice Principal Kang stepped in. Everything all right here, Mr. Han? He asked, his tone calm but curious. Yes, sir, Mr. Han replied quickly, forcing a professional smile. Just starting the lesson. Vice Principal Kang nodded, his gaze scanning the room. His eyes lingered on Mr. Han a bit too long. There was something unreadable in that look, something that made Mr. Han's chest tighten slightly. When the door closed again, the tension lingered. The students behaved, at least for a moment. Mr. Han turned back to the whiteboard. All right then, he said softly. Let's begin. Mr. Han steadied his breath as he faced the whiteboard again. The whispers had quieted down, but he could still feel the weight of all those eyes staring at him, curious, mocking, and bored. He forced a polite smile and began his lesson. Sex education isn't just about physical acts. It's about understanding respect, consent, and communication between partners. A student raised his hand lazily. Sir, why do we even need to learn about this? Isn't this stuff common sense? Mr. Han turned to him with patience. If it were common sense, people wouldn't make so many mistakes, he said gently. Some end up hurting others, or themselves, simply because they were never properly taught. The boy looked away, muttering, still weird, though. A few of the girls giggled again. One whispered. He's so awkward talking about this, it's kinda cute though. Mr. Han caught that and felt his cheeks warm again. He cleared his throat and continued. Now, can anyone tell me what the term consent means? Silence. No one answered. Finally, a voice from the back called out. It means you ask before doing anything dirty. The whole class broke into laughter again. Mr. Han sighed quietly. Not exactly. Consent means both people agree to something willingly. It's not just about asking, it's about respecting the other person's comfort. He paused for a moment, letting the words settle. Then, quietly, he said. Without consent, it's not love. It's just harm. That silenced the room. For a brief moment, everyone stared at him, not with laughter, but with something else. Maybe understanding. Maybe guilt. After the bell rang, Mr. Han exhaled deeply, gathering his notes. The classroom emptied quickly, leaving only the faint sound of footsteps in the hallway. He slumped against the desk, muttering under his breath. That was exhausting. A soft voice interrupted his thoughts. Mr. Han? He turned and froze. It was Vice Principal Kang again, tall, composed, and watching him with that same unreadable expression. I sat in for a bit, Kang said. You handled the class well. Mr. Han blinked, surprised. Oh, thank you, sir. Though I'm not sure the students learned anything today. Kang chuckled quietly. You'd be surprised. They'll remember more than you think. Mr. Han gave a small, tired smile. I hope so. Kang leaned against the doorframe, his voice soft but teasing. Still, you do get flustered easily when you talk about these topics. Mr. Han froze. I just want to teach properly, he stammered. Kang's eyes curved slightly, amusement flickering there. That's good. But remember, being a teacher doesn't mean you can't be human. Mr. Han blinked in confusion as Kang turned to leave. Something about his words and that small smirk lingered in the air long after he was gone. That evening, Mr. Han sat alone in the staff room, grading papers under the warm glow of the desk lamp. The chatter of other teachers had faded, leaving a peaceful quiet. But his mind kept replaying the students' laughter, their teasing words. Are you even experienced enough to teach this? He sighed, pressing his hand against his forehead. He hated how much it bothered him. Experience doesn't make someone a better teacher, he whispered, trying to convince himself. Just then, his phone buzzed. It was a message from a fellow teacher, Mr. Seo, the PE instructor. Hey, Han. Staff dinner tonight. Don't bail again. We're at the usual bar near the station. Mr. Han hesitated. He wasn't great with social settings, but maybe he needed a distraction tonight. He packed up his things and headed out. The bar was already lively when he arrived. Teachers sat around a long table, laughing, chatting, and clinking glasses. Han. You actually came. Seo called out, waving him over. Mr. Han smiled shyly and took a seat beside him. Couldn't say no this time, he said with a small laugh. The smell of grilled meat and soju filled the air. Conversations flowed easily around him, though he mostly listened quietly. Someone nudged his shoulder. Mr. Han, you're the new health teacher, right? Must be tough teaching that kind of subject. Mr. Han chuckled awkwardly. It has its challenges, yes. Another teacher leaned in with a grin. So, how experienced are you with the topic yourself? The table erupted in laughter again. Mr. Han's smile stiffened. That's not really something we discuss in a professional setting, he said politely. Seo raised his glass to cut the tension. Hey, leave the poor guy alone. He's just doing his job. The teasing stopped, but Mr. Han's heart was already racing. He laughed along weakly, wishing he could disappear. Later that night, after everyone left, Mr. Han stepped outside the bar into the cool night air. He took a deep breath, staring up at the quiet street. Why does everyone make it sound like it's shameful to just be me, he murmured. His phone buzzed again, another message. This time, from Vice Principal Kang. Still up? I forgot to give you the updated lesson plan. Want to stop by my office? Mr. Han frowned, glancing at the time. It was late. But Kang was his superior, and it wasn't like he could refuse. He replied. Sure. I'll be there in 10 minutes. He straightened his tie, fixed his hair in the reflection of a window, and headed back toward the school. The halls were empty when he arrived. Only the hum of the fluorescent lights filled the silence. Mr. Han knocked softly. Vice Principal Kang? It's me. Come in, came the voice from inside. He entered and froze. Kang was sitting casually behind his desk, jacket off, sleeves rolled up. His shirt collar was loosened, and his expression was softer than usual. "Sorry for calling you so late," Kang said, glancing up. "I just wanted to discuss your next class schedule before I forgot." Mr. Han nodded, taking a seat across from him. "It's all right. I was still awake." Kang smiled faintly. "You work too hard, you know that?" There was something about the way he said it, too gentle, too personal. Mr. Han looked down quickly. "I just want to do my job properly." Kang leaned forward slightly. "And you're doing that. More than you realize." Mr. Han blinked, startled by the warmth in his tone. For a moment, the room felt too quiet. Too close. Kang's gaze lingered, steady, deep, unreadable. And for the first time that day, Mr. Han didn't know what to say. The ticking of the clock echoed softly in Vice Principal Kang's office. Mr. Han sat tensely, his hands folded in his lap, feeling the weight of Kang's gaze on him. "So," Kang began, sliding a few papers across the desk. "These are the lesson adjustments for next week. I'd like you to review them before Friday." Mr. Han reached for the papers, careful not to meet his eyes. "Of course, sir. I'll go through them tonight." Kang's lips curved slightly. "You don't always have to be so formal with me, you know." Mr. Han blinked, glancing up. "Huh?" Kang leaned back in his chair, his voice lower now. "We're co-workers. You can relax when it's just the two of us." Mr. Han smiled politely, unsure how to respond. He looked down at the papers again, pretending to read. Kang watched him quietly for a moment, the way his fingers trembled slightly, the nervous way he avoided eye contact. Then he said softly, "You're too tense, Mr. Han. You'll burn yourself out if you keep holding everything in." Mr. Han finally met his eyes, those calm, dark eyes that seemed to see right through him. "I'm just trying to do things properly," he murmured. Kang chuckled. "Properly? Or perfectly?" Mr. Han's breath caught. "Perfection's a heavy burden, especially for someone as earnest as you." The words lingered like warmth in the room. For a moment, Mr. Han forgot how to breathe. Then, realizing how close they'd grown in conversation, he quickly stood up. Thank you for the advice, Vice Principal. I should get going." Kang tilted his head, amused. "You're always running away when things get a little personal." Mr. Han froze by the door, his hand hovering over the handle. His heart skipped a beat, but he forced a polite smile. "Good night, sir." And with that, he slipped out into the hallway, the sound of his hurried footsteps echoing down the empty corridor. Outside, the night air was cool against his flushed skin. He let out a shaky sigh, pressing a hand to his chest. What was that? Why did he say it like that? His pulse still raced from that look Kang gave him, sharp yet strangely gentle. He shook his head, scolding himself. Don't overthink it. He's just being kind, that's all. But even as he said it, he knew there was something else in that moment, something that made his heart flutter against his will. The next morning, Mr. Han stood in the faculty lounge, pouring himself a cup of coffee. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes. Rough night? Mr. Seo asked, walking by with a grin. Just couldn't sleep, Mr. Han replied with a weak chuckle. Seo leaned on the counter. You're too serious all the time, man. Loosen up. You're not that old yet. Mr. Han smiled awkwardly. I'll try. Just then, the door opened, and Vice Principal Kang walked in. His presence immediately drew attention, calm, confident, slightly intimidating. Their eyes met for the briefest moment. Kang's lips twitched upward, almost like a private smile meant just for him. Mr. Han quickly looked away, pretending to stir his coffee. Seo, noticing, raised a brow. Hey, you okay? You look like you just saw a ghost. I'm fine. Han stammered. Just hot coffee. Later that day, Mr. Han was back in the classroom, reviewing the same lesson he'd stumbled through before. This time, he tried to be firmer, more confident. Remember, he said, writing on the board, sex education is about communication, respect, and emotional understanding. A student called out, "Sir, have you ever been in love?" The room went silent again. Mr. Han blinked, caught off guard. What kind of question is that? It's part of understanding emotions, right? The boy said cheekily. The class giggled. Mr. Han sighed, flustered. That's not relevant to today's topic. One girl whispered to her friend. He's definitely never dated anyone. Mr. Han felt that familiar sting in his chest, that same teasing laugh echoing from yesterday. He turned to the board again, pretending to stay calm, but his hand trembled slightly as he wrote. After class, he sat at his desk, head resting in his hand. Maybe I really don't belong here. A shadow fell over him. Thinking too hard again? He looked up to see Kang leaning casually against the doorframe. Vice Principal, you shouldn't be sneaking up like that, Mr. Han said weakly. Kang smirked. You looked lost in thought. Mr. Han tried to smile. Just trying to figure out how to get through to my students. Maybe you're trying too hard to be what you think a teacher should be, Kang said quietly. Sometimes, being honest is more effective. Honest? Mr. Han echoed. Kang nodded. Don't hide behind professionalism all the time. Students can tell when you're pretending. That struck deeper than he expected. Mr. Han lowered his gaze. I guess I'm just afraid of saying the wrong thing. Kang's expression softened. Then start with what you believe is right. That's all any good teacher can do. Their eyes met again, closer this time, more open. Something unspoken passed between them. Then Kang broke the silence with a small chuckle. You know, for someone teaching sex education, you really are innocent. Mr. Han's eyes widened. I'm not. Relax, Kang said, laughing lightly. It's not an insult. Just an observation. Mr. Han's face turned red. He looked away quickly. Vice Principal, please, don't tease me like that. Kang smiled, not unkindly. All right. I'll stop. He straightened, stepping closer before heading out the door. See you after class, Mr. Han. Mr. Han sat there long after he left, his heart beating fast again. Why does he always say things like that? He pressed his hand to his chest, whispering to himself. He's my superior, that's all. But deep down, he knew that his body didn't believe the words anymore. The sun was beginning to set when Mr. Han finally left his classroom. The hallways were quiet, the kind of quiet that always made his thoughts louder. He clutched his lesson plan against his chest, replaying every awkward moment from the day. Maybe I'm just not good enough for this job. No matter what I do, the students keep laughing. He sighed softly and turned the corner, only to nearly bump into someone. Whoa there! It was Vice Principal Kang, holding a stack of folders. Oh, Vice Principal. I didn't see you there, Han said quickly, bowing slightly. Kang smiled. Still staying late again, huh? I was just cleaning up, Han replied. I lose track of time sometimes. You really should learn to take breaks. Kang shifted the folders in his arms, then tilted his head slightly. Actually, I was just heading to the teacher's lounge. You can join me for some coffee, if you'd like. Han blinked. That's okay, I don't want to bother you. It's not a bother, Kang interrupted smoothly. You look like you could use a breather. There was something in his voice, not an order, not even a suggestion. Just warmth. And somehow, Han couldn't say no. All right, he murmured. The lounge was quiet, lit only by the dim overhead light and the faint orange glow from outside. Kang set 2 mugs on the counter and poured the coffee. Han sat at the small table, awkwardly fiddling with a stir stick. You really didn't have to make me one too, he said shyly. Kang smiled faintly. You looked like you needed it. Han took a sip, bitter, but comforting. For a while, they just sat there in silence. Then Kang spoke, his voice calm. You've been taking on a lot since you started here. The new curriculum, the lesson plans, the awkward topics. He chuckled lightly. Not many teachers would volunteer for that. Han gave a small, embarrassed smile. I thought, maybe I could help the students understand things in a more respectful way. That's admirable, Kang said softly. But you also need to understand something, you can't teach others how to be open if you're afraid to be open yourself. Han looked up, startled. What do you mean? Kang leaned back in his chair. You always speak so carefully, like every word is filtered through a wall. Students can sense that. They respond to honesty, not caution. Han hesitated, then laughed nervously. I guess I just don't know how to be that honest. Especially about these topics. Kang's eyes softened. You're human, Han. It's okay to not have all the answers. Han stared into his coffee. The reflection of the overhead light shimmered faintly in the dark liquid. You really believe that? I do. Their eyes met again. For a second, the air between them felt heavier, thicker somehow. Neither spoke. The sound of the ticking clock seemed deafening in the silence. Kang broke the gaze first, chuckling softly. Sorry. I didn't mean to sound like I'm lecturing you. Han smiled faintly. It's all right. It's nice to hear someone say that. Kang stood up, walking past him to the counter. As he did, the faint scent of his cologne brushed past, sharp yet warm, like cedarwood. Han's pulse quickened. He hated how aware he suddenly was of everything, Kang's voice, his movements, even the faint sound of his breathing. What's wrong with me? When Kang turned back, he caught the distant look on Han's face and raised a brow. Are you all right? Yes. I was just thinking about tomorrow's class, Han stammered. Kang chuckled. You never stop working, do you? Han gave a small laugh. It keeps me focused. Kang stepped closer, resting one hand on the back of Han's chair. Maybe that's the problem, he said quietly. You're so focused on being perfect that you've forgotten how to just be. Han froze. The warmth of Kang's presence behind him sent a shiver up his spine. Kang's tone dropped, softer now. You don't need to pretend, Mr. Han. Han turned slightly, looking up, and their eyes met again, closer than before. Kang smiled faintly, almost teasingly. See? You look better when you relax a little. Han's breath caught. Vice Principal. Before he could finish, Kang stepped back suddenly, breaking the tension. He picked up his coffee cup, his expression returning to normal. Anyway, don't stay too late. Go home and rest. Han blinked, confused, like the moment had never happened. Right. I will. Kang gave him a small nod, then left the room. The door closed softly behind him, leaving Han alone with the echo of his heartbeat still pounding in his ears. He sat there for a long time, staring at his untouched coffee. The faint scent of Kang's cologne still lingered in the air. He whispered to himself. What was that? He didn't know if it was kindness, or something else entirely. But one thing was certain. For the first time since he started this job, Mr. Han couldn't stop thinking about someone. That night, he lay in bed, tossing and turning. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Kang's face, that quiet smile, that deep voice. He groaned, pulling the blanket over his head. Why am I like this? His heart raced at the memory of Kang leaning close, the warmth, the calm confidence in his voice. He turned on his side, trying to shake it off. But the more he tried, the more vivid it became. No. I can't think about him like that. He's my superior, my boss. But his heart didn't listen. The next day, Mr. Han walked into school with dark circles under his eyes and a half-hearted smile. He tried to act normal, but his students noticed immediately. Sir, you look tired, one girl said. He laughed weakly. Didn't sleep much. As the class went on, he found his thoughts wandering again. Every time he looked up, he half expected to see Kang standing in the doorway. When the bell finally rang, he let out a sigh of relief only to see Kang actually waiting by the door. "Vice Principal," Han said quickly, straightening up. "Do you need something?" Kang smiled slightly. "Relax. I just came to remind you about the staff meeting this evening." "Oh, right. I almost forgot," Han said, gathering his notes. Kang's gaze softened as he added quietly, "And get some rest before that, alright?" Han blinked, surprised. "You can tell?" Kang smirked. "You look like you fought a bear last night." Han laughed despite himself. "I'll try to look more alive next time." "Good." Kang turned to leave, then paused. "By the way, Mr. Han." Han looked up. "Yes?" Kang's eyes held his for just a moment longer than necessary. "Don't think too much. Just follow your instincts once in a while." And then he was gone again, leaving Han standing there, flustered, confused, and somehow smiling. The evening sun dipped below the horizon as the teachers gathered for the end-of-day staff meeting. The conference room was filled with the faint buzz of conversation, the smell of coffee, and the rustle of paperwork. Mr. Han sat quietly near the end of the table, glancing at the agenda but barely processing a word. He nodded whenever someone spoke, pretending to take notes, but his mind drifted again and again to the same person. Vice Principal Kang sat at the head of the table, his voice calm and confident as he discussed the upcoming student health program. His words flowed easily, composed, certain. Every time he spoke, Han found himself watching him unconsciously. The way Kang's hand moved when he gestured. The calmness in his tone. That quiet authority that made everyone in the room listen. Han quickly looked down at his notepad when Kang's gaze swept across the room, but it was too late. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and Kang's lips curved ever so slightly. Han's heart skipped. He quickly scribbled something meaningless on his paper, pretending to focus. The meeting finally ended. Chairs scraped against the floor as teachers began filing out. Han lingered, still collecting his notes. "Mr. Han." The voice came from behind him, smooth, low, familiar. He turned to see Kang standing there, holding his folder. "Yes, Vice Principal?" Han asked softly. Kang smiled faintly. "I wanted to discuss the upcoming seminar with you. Do you have a moment?" "Of course," Han replied immediately, though his pulse quickened again. Kang gestured toward the door. "Let's talk in my office. It's quieter there." Once again, they found themselves in that familiar room, dimly lit, calm, and too quiet. The air carried the faint scent of paper, coffee, and something distinctly Kang. Han sat down, placing his notes on the desk. "So, about the seminar?" Kang leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "Yes. You'll be teaching the senior students about safe relationships and boundaries. It's a sensitive subject, and I think you're the right one for it." Han blinked in surprise. Me?" Kang nodded. "You handle those topics carefully. Students might laugh at first, but they listen to sincerity. You have that." Han lowered his gaze, embarrassed. "Thank you. I'll do my best." Kang smiled softly. "I know you will." The silence that followed wasn't awkward this time, it was warm. Familiar. Kang watched him quietly for a few seconds before speaking again. "Do you mind if I ask you something personal?" Han hesitated, unsure. "Personal?" Kang's tone stayed calm. "You mentioned before that you wanted to help students understand relationships better. Was there a reason you chose this subject?" Han looked down at his hands, hesitating. Then he said quietly, "I guess. I wanted to teach what I never learned myself." Kang's eyes softened. "You mean?" Han gave a small, sad smile. "I grew up in a family that never talked about these things. Love, communication, respect, it was all just ignored. I thought if I could help others learn it early, maybe they wouldn't make the same mistakes." For a moment, Kang didn't speak. His gaze softened even more. That's admirable, he said gently. Han shook his head. Sometimes I wonder if I'm even the right person for it. I can't even talk about love without getting embarrassed. Kang leaned back, his voice low but sincere. Maybe that's exactly why you're perfect for it. You don't just teach it, you feel it. Han blinked, surprised. What do you mean by that? Kang smiled faintly, eyes glinting under the office light. You approach things with sincerity, not experience. That's rare. The room felt smaller suddenly, their words hanging heavy in the air. Han looked away, flustered. Vice Principal, you always say things like that. Like what? Kang asked, amused. Like you're trying to read me. Kang chuckled softly. Maybe I am. Han froze, glancing up. Why would you? Kang's gaze held his steady, calm, but intense enough to make Han's throat go dry. You're interesting, Mr. Han. Han's heartbeat quickened. I don't know what to say to that. You don't have to, Kang said, leaning slightly closer. You just have to be honest. Han's breath caught. For a brief moment, he could feel the warmth between them, quiet but unmistakable. Then Kang leaned back again, breaking the tension with a faint smile. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. Han quickly shook his head. No, it's fine. I just wasn't expecting that. Kang's voice softened. You really need to stop worrying so much about saying the wrong thing. Han looked at him quietly. And what about you, Vice Principal? Do you always say exactly what's on your mind? Kang smiled, not a smirk this time, but something gentler. Not always. But with you, it feels natural. Han's breath caught again. He looked away quickly, his ears burning. I think I should head home now. It's getting late. Kang nodded slowly. Of course. Then, just as Han reached the door, Kang added softly. Mr. Han. Han turned, hand still on the doorknob. Kang's tone dropped low. Don't lose that sincerity of yours. It's what makes you different. Han froze for a moment, caught between confusion and something else he couldn't name. Then he smiled faintly, bowing slightly. Good night, Vice Principal. As he left, Kang watched him go, his expression unreadable, but his eyes following every step. Outside, the school was quiet, bathed in the pale glow of the streetlights. Mr. Han walked slowly down the path, his mind spinning. Every word, every look, every little smile, they all played back in his head like a movie he couldn't turn off. He pressed a hand to his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heart. Different, huh? A small smile tugged at his lips. He didn't know what this feeling was: admiration, curiosity, something deeper, but it made the loneliness he'd carried for so long feel lighter. For the first time in a long while, he didn't dread coming to school the next day. He actually looked forward to it. Morning sunlight filtered through the tall windows of the faculty office. Mr. Han sat at his desk, the faint hum of the photocopier behind him, as he highlighted notes for the upcoming Healthy Relationships seminar. He'd read the same paragraph 3 times, but his mind kept wandering. Every time he saw the words mutual respect or trust, he thought of one person. Vice Principal Kang. Just thinking his name made his heart tighten in that strange, nervous way again. He shook his head and muttered under his breath, "Focus, Han Ji-hoon. You're at work." A knock sounded at the door. "Come in," he called. Kang stepped inside, sleeves rolled up, holding a small folder. "Morning, Mr. Han. I printed the schedule for the seminar team meeting. Thought I'd bring you a copy myself." Han quickly stood, flustered. Thank you, Vice Principal." "You didn't have to." Kang smiled faintly. "If I left it to the intern, you'd probably get it next week." Han laughed awkwardly, taking the paper. "True enough." As he sat down, Kang leaned on the edge of the desk, watching him glance through the document. "You've been putting in a lot of effort," Kang said quietly. "The students have been responding better lately." Han looked up, surprised. "They have?" Kang nodded. They're asking questions instead of snickering. That's a win. Han smiled, warmth spreading in his chest. I'm glad to hear that. I was worried I wasn't reaching them. You're doing fine, Kang said softly. Then after a pause, he added, you just needed someone to remind you. Han blinked, unsure how to reply. The words felt personal somehow. Before he could speak, Kang straightened. Anyway, I'll see you at the meeting after lunch. He left the office, the scent of his cologne lingering like a quiet echo. Han exhaled slowly, touching the paper in his hands. Why does he keep saying things that stay with me? The meeting room buzzed later that afternoon as teachers discussed logistics for the upcoming seminar. Charts, presentation slides, and topics were being passed around. Han stood at the front, explaining his outline on consent and respect in relationships. He spoke with confidence now, clearer, calmer than before. When he glanced toward the back, Kang was there, arms crossed, listening intently. Their eyes met briefly. Kang gave him a subtle nod, silent approval, and Han felt a small spark of pride light up inside. When the session ended, Kang approached. Good work, he said. You're getting comfortable with the topic. Han laughed softly. Maybe your advice finally sunk in. Kang's smile deepened. Then I'll keep giving it. They both chuckled, the sound light and easy. A few days later, the two of them stayed after school to prepare presentation materials. Stacks of pamphlets and posters covered the desk. The sky outside had turned orange, the building nearly empty except for them. Kang was typing on his laptop while Han organized papers. Every so often, their shoulders brushed when they reached for the same stack. Each accidental touch made Han's pulse jump a little faster. Finally, Kang leaned back with a sigh. That's the last of it. Han nodded, rubbing the back of his neck. We actually finished earlier than I expected. You make a good partner, Kang said casually. Han froze, blinking. Partner? Kang smiled at his reaction. Work partner, of course. Oh. Right, Han said quickly, face warming. Kang chuckled softly. You're adorable when you get flustered. Han's eyes widened. Vice Principal. Relax, Kang said, holding up a hand. Just teasing. But the warmth behind his eyes made it clear he meant every word. They packed up in silence after that, though the air between them wasn't uncomfortable, it was alive, pulsing with something neither of them dared to name. When they stepped out of the building, the last of the sunset painted the campus in soft gold. Kang turned to him. You walking home? Han nodded. Yeah, it's not far. I'll walk with you, Kang said simply. They fell into step together. For a while, neither spoke, only the sound of cicadas and their footsteps filled the air. Then Kang broke the silence. You ever think teaching can be lonely? Han looked at him curiously. Lonely? Kang nodded, eyes on the fading sky. We spend all day guiding others, but we don't really talk about ourselves. It's easy to forget we're human too. Han thought about that for a moment. I suppose it can be lonely sometimes. He smiled faintly. But lately, it's been less so. Kang glanced at him, a small smile tugging at his lips. I'm glad. Their eyes met again, longer this time. No teasing, no words, just quiet understanding. When they reached the main road, Kang stopped. This is where I turn, he said softly. Get home safe, Mr. Han. Han nodded. You too, Vice Principal. Kang hesitated for a second, then said, and don't stay up too late thinking about lesson plans again. Han chuckled. No promises. Kang smiled, turning to leave. Good night. Han watched him walk away, his figure framed by the streetlights. Something warm fluttered in his chest, something he didn't want to ignore anymore. He whispered to himself. Good night. Kang. That night, lying in bed, Mr. Han stared at the ceiling, replaying their walk in his mind. For the first time in months, the thought of tomorrow made him smile. The next morning, Mr. Han arrived at school earlier than usual. The corridors were still quiet, the sunlight spilling through the tall windows, catching the dust in the air like tiny fireflies. He stood by the notice board, pinning the last of the posters for the Healthy Relationships seminar. Behind him, a familiar voice said, "You really don't rest, do you?" Han turned, startled, and found Vice Principal Kang leaning against the doorway, coffee cup in hand. "Oh, good morning, sir." Kang smiled. "You're here before everyone again. I just wanted to make sure everything looks right." "It already does," Kang said, walking closer. He adjusted one of the posters slightly, his hand brushing Han's for a moment. Neither of them moved for a heartbeat, then Han stepped back, clearing his throat. Thanks for the coffee yesterday," Han said quickly, trying to sound casual. Kang chuckled. "It's nothing. But if you insist on thanking me, you can buy me one next time." Han blinked. "Next time?" Kang's smile deepened. "I'll hold you to that." By midday, the seminar began. Students filled the auditorium, whispering and laughing among themselves. Han adjusted the microphone, trying to ignore the nervous flutter in his chest. Kang stood at the side of the stage, arms folded, giving him an encouraging nod. That single gesture steadied Han more than he expected. He began to speak. "At first, I thought teaching this topic would be difficult," he admitted into the microphone. "But I realized, we can't understand respect or care unless we learn to talk about them honestly." The room quieted. Even the usual group of joking students were listening now. Han continued, his voice steady. "Healthy relationships aren't about perfection. They're about communication, empathy, and consent, the courage to listen, and to be honest about what we feel." When he finished, the room erupted in applause. Kang clapped too, proud and composed, but his eyes softened with something more personal, something only Han seemed to notice. After the students left, Han stood backstage, relief washing over him. Kang approached, holding out a bottle of water. "Great job," he said. That was exactly what they needed to hear. Han took the bottle, smiling. "Thank you. I was terrified at first." "I could tell," Kang said lightly. "But you handled it." Han laughed quietly. "Honestly, I couldn't stop thinking about what you said about being honest instead of perfect." Kang tilted his head. "Did it help?" Han looked up at him, meeting his gaze. "Yes. More than you know." For a moment, neither of them looked away. Then Kang broke the silence with a soft chuckle. "You're growing fast, Mr. Han." Han's face warmed. "Don't tease me." "I'm not," Kang said simply. "I'm proud." Later that evening, the staff gathered in the cafeteria for a small celebration. Laughter filled the room, teachers chatted over food and music. Han sat at a corner table, quietly enjoying the noise. Kang soon joined him, setting down 2 glasses of juice. "Still avoiding the crowd?" Kang asked. Han smiled. "I prefer watching. Everyone seems happy." "They should be," Kang said. "The seminar went well. You were the heart of it." Han blinked. "I just spoke about the lesson." Kang shook his head. "No, you spoke from experience. That's why it mattered." Han looked down, touched but unsure how to answer. "Thank you, really." Kang leaned closer, lowering his voice slightly. "You don't have to thank me for telling the truth." Han looked up, and for a second, all the noise around them seemed to fade. Kang's expression softened. "You've changed a lot since your first day." Han gave a small laugh. "Hopefully for the better." "Definitely for the better," Kang said, smiling. "You're starting to look like someone who believes in himself." Han hesitated, then said quietly, "Maybe that's because someone else believes in me, too." Kang's gaze held his, the faintest smile curving at the corner of his lips. "Then I'll keep doing that." When the celebration ended, Han walked out into the cool night, the faint music still echoing behind him. He breathed in the crisp air, feeling lighter, freer. As he reached the gate, he saw Kang standing there, jacket in hand. "Heading home?" Kang asked. Yeah. You too? Just finished locking up. They walked together once more, side by side beneath the dim streetlights. Neither spoke for a long while, and yet, the silence between them felt comfortable, almost peaceful. When they reached the corner, Kang stopped. Mr. Han. Han turned. Yes? Kang hesitated, just a fraction, then said softly. You did really well today. You should be proud of yourself. Han smiled faintly. Thank you. I couldn't have done it without your help. Kang shook his head. You would have done it anyway. You just needed someone to remind you could. Han's chest tightened at those words. He nodded slowly. Good night, Vice Principal. Kang gave a gentle smile. Good night, Ji-hoon. Hearing his first name spoken so quietly made Han's heart skip. When he finally walked away, he realized he was still smiling, unable to stop. That night, he wrote in his journal something he hadn't done in years. Maybe teaching isn't about being perfect. Maybe it's about learning alongside someone who makes you want to try. He paused, then added beneath it. Today, I finally felt seen. The following week passed in a blur of routine and quiet contentment. Mr. Han noticed that the hallways no longer felt so heavy in the mornings. Students greeted him with smiles, a few even stopped to ask genuine questions about the seminar topics. Every time that happened, he felt a small spark of pride and a quiet memory of Kang's words echoing in his mind, be honest, not perfect. One afternoon, as rain tapped against the windows, Kang appeared at his classroom door. Meeting's been postponed, he said, holding an umbrella dripping water onto the floor. Looks like the weather wants us to rest for once. Han smiled. Maybe that's a sign we both should slow down. Kang stepped inside, closing the door behind him. I was actually thinking the same thing. How about we spend the free period planning the new student project instead? Less paperwork, more talking. Han nodded. Sure. Let's talk. They sat side by side at the back of the room, the rain drumming softly above them. Kang spread a few notes across the desk. I want the next program to focus on empathy, helping students understand emotions before actions. Han looked thoughtful. That's important. People think education only means giving facts, not feelings. Kang glanced at him, impressed. You really have a gift for saying things simply. Han laughed quietly. Maybe that's all I'm good at. Don't underestimate it, Kang said. Clarity changes minds. Their eyes met for a brief moment, steady, warm, and full of quiet trust. A loud clap of thunder made the lights flicker. Han startled slightly. Kang chuckled. You don't like storms? I'm fine, Han said quickly, though his hand still trembled a little. Without thinking, Kang reached out, resting his hand gently on Han's wrist. Hey, he said softly, it's just rain. Han froze, surprised by the gesture, but he didn't pull away. The warmth from Kang's hand steadied him more than he expected. See? Kang said with a small smile. Nothing to worry about. When he let go, the absence of that warmth lingered longer than either admitted. Later, as the rain eased, they finished the draft for the empathy workshop. Han stretched his arms, smiling. We actually make a good team. Kang smirked. You're finally admitting it? Han chuckled. You've been saying it since day one. And I was right, Kang said, gathering the papers. You should believe me more often. Han tilted his head. Why? Because, Kang replied, voice light but sincere, I don't say things I don't mean. Han's breath caught for a second before he smiled. Then I'll remember that. When the rain stopped, Kang offered to walk Han to the bus stop. The street shimmered under puddles and reflected lights, the air smelled clean. You ever notice, Han said, how quiet the world feels after a storm? Kang nodded. That's when everything's fresh again. They stood together beneath a single umbrella, the space between them small but comfortable. Water dripped from the edges while their footsteps matched on the wet pavement. When they reached the stop, Kang looked at him. Get some rest tonight. You look like you've been carrying the whole school on your back. Han laughed softly. You sound like my conscience. Kang grinned. Then listen to me once in a while. The bus arrived, lights glimmering in the rain. Han stepped up onto the first stair, then turned back. Good night, Vice Principal Kang. Good night, Ji-hoon, Kang replied, his tone quiet, almost fond. That night, Han sat by his window watching raindrops race down the glass. He thought about how far he'd come, from a nervous teacher stumbling through awkward lessons to someone who could stand before a room full of students and speak sincerely. And through it all, one person had quietly guided him forward. He smiled faintly, whispering into the still room. Thank you. Kang Hyun. Outside, the clouds finally parted, and a small streak of moonlight slipped through the rain-washed sky. A few days later, the school buzzed with energy again. Students hurried through the halls carrying art supplies and notebooks. Posters about the upcoming empathy workshop hung everywhere. Mr. Han moved from class to class checking materials, his calm voice keeping the students focused. From across the corridor, Kang watched for a moment before walking over. You've got half the building helping you, he said, half teasing, half proud. Han smiled. It feels nice seeing them excited. I didn't expect they'd care this much. They care because you care, Kang replied simply. Then, noticing the dust on Han's sleeves, he reached forward and brushed it away with his thumb. The gesture was small, professional even, but it made Han freeze for an instant. Kang stepped back smoothly. Sorry. Habit. Han shook his head quickly. It's fine, thank you. By afternoon, the two were back in the faculty room, finalizing the outline for the student discussion groups. Han read aloud from his notes. Activity 2, understanding someone's feelings before reacting. Does that sound too simple? Kang shook his head. No. Simple ideas make people speak honestly. Complicated words scare them off. Han glanced up with a laugh. You always know how to say things so clearly. Kang shrugged. That's experience talking. You learn a lot from mistakes. Han hesitated, curious. You sound like you're speaking from one. Kang smiled faintly. Maybe I am. He didn't elaborate, and Han didn't press, but the look in his eyes lingered, a flash of something wistful beneath the calm. That evening, the workshop team stayed late to decorate the gym. When most of the teachers left, only Han and Kang remained, hanging the last banner. Higher, Kang said, holding the ladder steady while Han reached up with the tape. Like this? Han asked. Perfect. Don't fall. Han laughed, voice echoing in the empty space. You'd catch me, wouldn't you? Kang looked up, smiling. Without question. Han felt his cheeks warm, though he tried to hide it by focusing on the banner. When he climbed down, their shoulders brushed again. The contact was brief, but enough to make the air around them still for a heartbeat. They turned off the lights together, the gym falling into the soft silver of evening. Outside, the sky glowed faintly violet. You know, Kang said as they walked toward the exit, when I first met you, I thought you'd last a semester before burning out. Han raised a brow, amused. That's a compliment? Kang chuckled. It is now. You proved me wrong. I almost quit in the beginning, Han admitted. I kept thinking the students deserved someone braver. Kang glanced at him. They already have one. Han met his eyes, surprised by the sincerity in them. You really mean that? Of course, Kang said. Courage isn't loud. Sometimes it's just showing up every day and trying again. Han looked ahead, smiling softly. You always know what to say. Occupational skill, Kang replied with a grin. Vice principals talk people off ledges all the time. When they reached the front gate, the streetlights had just flickered on. The faint hum of crickets filled the quiet space between them. Workshops tomorrow, Kang said. You ready? As ready as I'll ever be, Han answered. Kang nodded. Good. Then tomorrow, let me handle the opening remarks. You take the interactive part. Han tilted his head. Teamwork again? Kang smiled. Exactly. We make a good one. They both laughed softly at that. The next morning, the workshop began. Rows of students filled the gym, divided into small groups. Han guided them through each discussion with patience, listening to every shy voice in awkward silence. At the side of the room, Kang watched, occasionally helping when groups grew restless. Whenever Han looked uncertain, Kang met his gaze and gave a quiet nod, the same reassuring gesture as always. By the end of the day, the students applauded, genuinely moved. Han bowed slightly, smiling, a rare confidence lighting his face. Afterward, Kang handed him a bottle of water. You did it again, he said. Every one of them listened. Han laughed breathlessly. I can't believe it's over. Believe it, Kang said. You made something good happen here. As they walked down the corridor, Han asked softly, Why do you keep helping me this much? Kang paused for a moment before answering. Because watching someone grow reminds me why I started teaching in the first place. Han blinked. You mean me? Kang smiled. Who else? For once, Han didn't blush or stammer. He simply smiled back, quietly grateful for how far they'd both come. That night, sitting on his couch at home, Han looked through the photos the students had taken during the workshop, laughing faces, open hands, simple kindness. Among them was one picture someone had snapped of him and Kang talking near the board, both smiling. He lingered on it for a while before setting his phone down. The rain began again outside, soft and rhythmic, and for the first time it sounded comforting. Han leaned back against the cushions and whispered. Maybe some lessons aren't meant for the classroom after all. The weekend arrived quietly. For the first time in months, Mr. Han woke without an alarm. The light filtering through his curtains was soft, gentle, almost peaceful. He stretched, smiled faintly, and remembered Kang's words from 2 days ago. Sunday at noon. The cafe near the station. The thought made his heart flutter with a strange mix of excitement and nerves. He spent the morning cleaning his apartment, something he'd promised himself to do 100 times before but never managed. By the time the clock neared 11, he was standing before the mirror, debating which shirt looked less like a teacher and more like himself. He shook his head and laughed softly. It's just coffee. Why are you acting like it's an exam? The cafe was warm and modern, tucked between a bookstore and a flower shop. The smell of roasted beans and soft jazz music filled the air. Kang was already there, seated by the window. He wore casual clothes, no tie, no jacket. Just a simple shirt with the sleeves rolled up. It was the first time Han had seen him outside the school's formal walls, and something about it made him pause for a second at the entrance. Kang noticed him instantly and waved, a small, easy smile playing at his lips. Right on time, he said as Han sat down. I didn't want to make the vice principal wait, Han teased gently. Kang chuckled. Today, I'm just Kang Hyun. Leave the titles at the door. Han smiled. All right, Kang Hyun it is. They talked for hours about teaching, students, and things that had nothing to do with work. Kang spoke about his years abroad, how he learned that people often confuse confidence with kindness. Han shared stories from his early teaching days, the awkward mistakes, the funny misunderstandings. For the first time, Han realized how natural it felt to just talk to him. No pressure, no distance, just a quiet, familiar warmth. When the conversation paused, Kang leaned back, studying him with that calm, thoughtful expression Han had grown used to. You look different lately, he said. Han blinked. Different how? Lighter, Kang said. Like you finally stopped fighting yourself. Han looked down, hiding a small smile. Maybe I did. Good, Kang said softly. You deserve to breathe a little. They left the cafe after sunset, the air cool and fragrant with blooming jasmine. The street was quiet except for the distant rumble of cars. Han adjusted his bag on his shoulder and said, Thank you for inviting me today. I didn't realize how much I needed to just talk. Anytime, Kang replied. You make good company. Han chuckled, slightly flustered. I think that's the first time someone said that to me. Then I'm glad to be the first, Kang said, smiling. A few days later, school life returned to its rhythm. But things felt different now, lighter, easier. Students greeted Mr. Han more openly, teachers sought his help, and even his classes ran smoother than before. During lunch, Kang stopped by his classroom. I just saw the attendance reports, he said. Your class has the best participation rate in the department. Han blinked, surprised. Really? Kang nodded. Really? Seems the students have found someone they trust. Han smiled, touched. I'm happy they feel that way. You've earned it, Kang said, leaning slightly on the doorway. Don't ever doubt that. Later that week, the two were asked to prepare a presentation for the district's education board. It meant long evenings at the school, empty hallways, shared coffee, and quiet moments filled with soft conversation. On one of those evenings, Han yawned as he scrolled through slides. You should go home, Kang said. It's almost 10. I just want to finish this last section, Han replied, eyes on the screen. Kang shook his head with a half-smile. You're hopeless. Dedicated, Han corrected with a laugh. Kang leaned over to check the slides beside him. Their shoulders brushed a familiar warmth that neither commented on. After a pause, Kang said quietly, I think we work too well together. Han looked up, smiling. Is that a bad thing? Kang's eyes softened. No. Just rare. The night grew quieter. Han leaned back in his chair, stretching. I never thought I'd actually enjoy these late nights. Maybe because you're not alone in them anymore, Kang said lightly. Han met his eyes, the meaning behind those words sinking deeper than either expected. He smiled faintly. Maybe you're right. When they finally left the building, the courtyard lights flickered across the pavement. Kang walked beside him, hands in his pockets. I'll drive you home, he offered. You don't have to, Han said. It's a short walk. I insist, Kang replied. It's late. They rode in comfortable silence, a hum of the engine and soft city lights filling the quiet. When Kang stopped in front of Han's apartment, neither moved right away. Thanks for the ride, Han said finally. Anytime, Kang replied, turning slightly toward him. You really have changed. Han blinked. Still lighter? Kang smiled. Still brighter. Han laughed softly. I'll take that. He stepped out of the car, then turned before closing the door. Good night, Kang Hyun. Good night, Ji-hoon, Kang said. As the car pulled away, Han stood under the streetlight, the faint glow reflecting in his eyes. He couldn't help but think that night didn't feel like an ending. It felt like a beginning.